Hello, welcome to the Eternal ROI Podcast. I am Chris Patton. I'm CEO of His Way at Work. And today I've got a guest that, quite frankly, is a very humble man, but is mind-blowing when you read his resume. If I started out and let you know all of what was in there, we'd actually take up the 30 minutes of the episode and wouldn't have even time to talk to him. So I'm going to hit some highlights and then I'll bring him in. But Dr. Dondi Costin is a variety of different, has a variety of different accomplishments. Was in the military, in the Air Force, as a chaplain, was in Afghanistan shortly after or immediately after 9/11, has 5 different master's degrees and 2 doctorates, retired or ended his military career, I should say, as the Major General in the Air Force at the Pentagon, and has now moved to Charleston Southern University as the president of the university. So if that kind of a resume doesn't get you excited, I don't know what will. I'm thrilled to talk to him. I want to introduce you. Dr. Costin, thank you for coming today.
Thanks. It's great to be with you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, it is, as I told you earlier, I've met you multiple times. You do not exude or brag about or talk about what you've accomplished in your life. But when I look through your resume, when I look through your path to this point, it really is mind-blowing. And I know you've been the one that's lived it firsthand. I'd love to hear a little bit about, just from the very beginning, what led you along that path, what made you make some of those choices that brought you through the various things I've listed and up to this point at Charleston Southern.
Yeah, thanks. I was, looking back, I was probably called to the ministry in high school, but I dreaded the very thought of standing in front of people and talking. I wasn't that smart, but I figured that if you were a preacher, you had to stand in front of people and talk. So that's not for me. And so in God's providence and His patience, I joined the Air Force, went to the Air Force Academy, really having no idea what was going to be next. When I had a conversation with my mom, once I learned about the Air Force Academy, I said, Mom, this place would allow me to do 2 things, one for me and one for you. One is that I'd get to serve my country, and the second is that you wouldn't have to pay for college. And so right. She was very excited about that. So I went to the Air Force Academy, and as having been raised in a Christian home, my mom had prayed that I would retain my faith in college, and
sure.
As a result, she basically prayed me into the Baptist Student Union at the Air Force Academy, and she prayed a Baptist chaplain who has become a lifelong mentor and friend to show up at the same time that I did. And so fast forward a number of years, I did finally surrender to the call to ministry, and my call to ministry really echoes Moses. And so Moses in Exodus chapter 3 and 4, God is calling him to do something big, and he basically refuses for the same reasons I was using, the same excuses I was using. And so God tells Moses in so many words, listen, if you go, I will help you. I will be with you. I will strengthen you. And so I said, all right, Lord, if that's true. Started going to school after that. I was an industrial engineer in the Air Force, and went to school part-time, best I could. This was pre-internet, so it was quite a bit more challenging back in the day than it was. But I was able to finish the Master of Divinity degree and become a chaplain at the tenure point. And all along the way, my only goal every step of the way was I just wanted to be a chaplain. And as best I can tell, I didn't have a lot of aspirations for anything more than being a chaplain. But the lessons I learned in my first assignment from a very wise mentor who pulled me aside and told me that he thought I was becoming distracted by my calling to be a chaplain and was not giving everything I should be given to my current employer as an engineer. And so it was some of the best advice I'd ever given. So from that point forward, I said, I'm going to bloom where I'm planted. I'm going to do what God has for me here. I'm not going to think about the next job. I'm not going to live for the next job. I'm going to prepare. I'm going to do the things necessary that if God calls, I'll be ready. And that has served me well. And so when it came time to leave the chaplaincy to go to become a president of a university, I did the same thing. And so Vicki and I prayed, God, help us to understand what's next. And so he led us to a place where we could continue the kinds of things we were doing with 18 to 22-year-olds, because the Air Force is primarily 18 to 22-year-olds. And so it's been a good fit.
Well, you skipped over a lot, but I understand, and what an incredible path. So tell me a little bit more. You said my dream, my ultimate goal for a period was simply to become a chaplain. What did that mean to you? What in your mind was becoming a chaplain? What was the meaning behind it? What did it look like to you as a goal?
Yeah, when I was already in the Air Force, and so the path that God has given me, if we had a couple of hours, I could show you in multiple places, and I think God has done this on purpose. In multiple places, I could point to transition points that can only be explained by the hand of God. Just for instance, I was an engineer, and those above me in my denomination said, you have to finish a Master Divinity degree, and there's no way you can do that while you're on active duty. You're going to have to finish your time. You're going to have to get out, go to seminary, be out of the Air Force 5 to 7 years, and then maybe come back if we let you. And I just said to them, but what if God lets it happen? And they said, well, it's never going to happen. And so I said, okay. So I finished the Master Divinity in the time required, and went back to them and my denominational endorsers and said, well, God allowed it to happen. Now, can I become a chaplain? And they said, there's no way you can become a chaplain. You have to get experience, and you don't have time to do that. And so I said, but what if God allowed it to happen? What if it happened? And they said, well, it'll never happen. Well, after a couple of years later, it happened. I came back to them, and they said, we've never seen this before. And so they told me, we're not going to endorse you to the chaplaincy because we have other people waiting in line. And so I said, Lord, they say they're not going to endorse me. What's my next step? And he said in so many words, well, there are others who can endorse you. So I said, okay, I'll go talk to them. So talked to them, told them my story, and I simply said, just if you think that I am a theological fit for you with my other endorser, let's just put the paperwork in and see what happens. And they did. So I basically went through the eye of a needle at that point. Fast forward, when it came time to, so that had to happen before I'd been in the Air Force 10 years. And so it happened at 9 years and 11 months. It happened, and I was able to go from being a line officer to being a chaplain. Fast forward a couple of decades, and all along, I had been told, because I'd been a line officer for so many years, about 10 years at that point, people said, you might have become a chaplain. And I know why you want to be a chaplain, because it's, for me, I love the Air Force already, and I love the idea of serving airmen and their families. And for me, when I answered the call to ministry, I knew I didn't want to be a youth pastor. I didn't like lock-ins when I was a youth myself. I wasn't going to like lock-ins. But for me, it was an immediate call to the chaplaincy. There was never a question in my mind. So again, fast forward all those years, and all along people would tell me, it's too bad, you went to the Air Force Academy, you got a decent resume, but there's no way you'll ever be the Chief of Chaplains. And I said, I don't care, but why do you say that? They said, well, you won't have time to have the right jobs, you won't have time to do the right things. Other people got a head start on you. And I said, that's the best news I've ever heard, because there's no pressure on me to do anything other than just be a chaplain. I'm going to, back to my first lesson, I'm going to bloom where I'm planted. And if God opens other doors, then that's gravy. So every time God allowed a promotion, I said, well, okay, that's gravy. And for me, promotion was an opportunity to A, to stay longer, and B, to serve in various capacities, to increase influence and impact as God will. So again, fast forward to the end of my career. I won't bore you with all the details, but the only, the laws of our country dictate, or at least dictated at the time, that you have to become a general officer before you hit your 30th year of commissioned service. And again, people all along had been doing the math. They'd been doing the calculations. They said it could never happen. And so I said, that's awesome. It relieves so much pressure off me. Just in the providence of God, when it came time for my one opportunity to become a general officer chaplain, both the Chief of Chaplains and the Deputy Chief of Chaplains were turning 65 within 4 months of each other. And the way the rules work, you can't, you have to retire. At least then they changed the rule because of what I'm about to explain to you now.
Wow.
But you can't, if you can't complete your term by the time you turn 65, then you have to retire. So both the 2-star and the 1-star had to retire, which meant they had to pick two. They had to pick a 2-star to replace and a 1-star to replace the 1-star. And so I said, there's no way this is going to happen. I'll put my paperwork in. It's impossible. And God said, that's the point. It's impossible. It's been impossible all along, every step of the way. You should never have become a chaplain, but I made it happen. And you should never have become the Chief of Chaplains. But not only that, I wasn't. I was selected not to be the 1-star, but I skipped 1-star and became the 2-star, the major general. That's not what I wanted. I was like, come on, I'd love to have 3 years as a brigadier general to at least learn the job. And as I look back on it, God said to me in so many words, but if we did it that way, some people might think that it's because of your ability. And I want everyone to know that the only way this happened is because I did it. And it happened at again, I said it had to happen before 30 years. It happened in my 30th year. There was one opportunity and only one, and God made it happen. So, when it came time to figure out what the next thing was after the Chief of Chaplains job, I basically, about 5-7 years before, I got a PhD, assuming that when my time in the Air Force ran out, I would maybe go be a Bible college professor or seminary or something like that, something that I thought I would enjoy. That would be fruitful. And believe it or not, 2 years and 2 months into my last, by definition, 3-year job, I Googled college president vacancies just to see what would happen. And if you think about it, as I have, in the universe of colleges, there are about 4,500 colleges who would take a conservative evangelical chaplain, all right, to be the president of a college. Notice I said nothing in there about academic administration. Yeah, years before I had taught Air Force ROTC as a young captain, but nothing in there would make anybody with any sense on a search committee say, "This guy, we should bet on this pony." So I Googled college president vacancies, just see what would happen. Long story short, there was one university in all of Christendom that had a similar profile with an open president's job, and the guy I replaced, who thank God is still on campus, the guy I replaced had been in the job 34 years. And so when I went in to tell the General Officer Matters office at the Pentagon that, it looked like I'd found another job, they said, well, we'd like you to stay another year if you would. And then she asked me the question, she said, is this the job of a lifetime? I said, well, the guy I'm replacing has been there 34 years, and so it certainly is the job of my lifetime. And what we were looking for is a way for us to Vicki and I to serve together, to do a lot of the same things that we had done, as chaplains serving 18 to 22-year-olds, and so again, it's only God could have done it, and so at every point along the way, there is no other explanation than that God in His sweet providence said, "I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it not for your glory because you have no reason to have any. I'm going to do it for my glory." He says, "Your job is to serve me and serve me well, and to give your life as a ransom for many in the way that you can." And so that's kind of how it's gone.
That's amazing. What blows my mind, and this is where I want to pause for a moment, and I want everybody that's listening to put themselves in this same situation. Typically, as leaders, just leaders in general, military leaders, education leaders, business leaders, we have some drive in us or some wiring from God that is driven to achieve, to conquer the mountain, to accomplish a goal or a project or whatever. And it is usually through will and grit and determination that we think we're going to get there. And in some cases, it happens the way we think. But what's more amazing is when we can relinquish, surrender, let go, as you've said. You've got an unbelievable list of accomplishments, and I didn't even begin to crack into it in truth. But at every point, what you've said is, I tried to follow that early advice, bloom where I'm planted, surrender and honor God in this moment, in this spot, and not worry about what's next. You were given a gift in some ways, as you said, where there was no expectation of the next job or the next thing because it was, by all intents and purposes, impossible. So then you are relieved of that pressure or expectation, and you can just do what you're doing. Man, if we can just figure that out in our businesses, figure that out in our homes, and literally just turn every bit of it over to God on a day-to-day, moment-by-moment basis, what can He do? I mean, He can do anything, right? That seems obvious sometimes, but then I'm going to walk out this door today, and I promise you I will try to control something before the day's out instead of surrendering it, right? So, well, I appreciate you sharing so much of that, and also being so genuine, not just putting some humility out there for the look of it, but just so genuine. And this is what I did, and God just made these things happen, and I just kind of went along. But it starts with the surrender, right? So He's not going to take someone that's bent and determined to do A, B, C, and usually pull them off that and force them into something else. We've got to turn things over and let Him do that. So as we look at our businesses, as we look at our roles in every aspect of our lives, that's the idea we've got to have. So as you and your wife looked at Charleston Southern specifically, but in general, this idea of moving into a university picture, I know it's still the common thread of the 20 to 22-year-olds, the younger men or men and women at this point. And what were your goals going into that job? What was your mindset? Drawing on everything you've seen and done in the past, what was your mindset going into this school? What were some of the high-level goals you had for this university?
Yeah, going in, we were attracted to Charleston Southern by the mission. And Charleston Southern, as you well know, is a decidedly unapologetic Christian university. It's not historically Christian, it's not used to be Christian. It's not, well, our founders were Christian, but we're not. We're a Christian university. And so I was attracted by the mission. I was attracted by the vision statement, which includes the phrase integrating faith and learning, leading, and serving. Really the whole idea of joining another kind of team with a senior leadership team and faculty and staff who are committed to Christ and who wanted to live their lives for the glory of God and the good of other people, and the opportunity to continue to mold and shape the future generations of business and education and engineering and all kinds of other things. That was exciting. I loved leading large teams. I love the opportunity and the variety in the day of a CEO or a university president or a pastor. They're just. I love the variety that happens in the day, because no day is the same. There are plenty of days that I wish were
Amen.
the same.
Yes, I get that.
But they're just the whole thing. And so we felt so compelled. And again, Vicki and I, it was important to both of us that we could do something together. A lot of my military career, she was a teacher for 23 of those years, but a lot of my military career, I would go off and fly around the world and, spend, months on end, and she'd stay home. But the thing that we have so enjoyed about Charleston Southern is that she can be as engaged as she wants to be. And so I've really appreciated that. So it's been a lot of fun. Yeah.
The key word I keep hearing is serving. What you saw as a chaplain, what you saw chaplaincy to be, was serving the families. I'm going to assume some of what you thought about the call to ministry was about the serving. And now as you go into this work with the university, you are serving. That is not necessarily common from the leadership role. Now, servant leadership is obviously caught on along the years, and there are quite a few that promote that. But when you say serving from the what the world says is the top position, right? What does that mean? What actually do you mean by serving those that you're leading?
Our university, we have an impact statement, and the impact statement is preparing servant leaders to pursue significant lives. And so what we try to do is in every level of the university, and because I'm the president, I think it's my obligation to start at the top of the organizational chart anyway. But what does it mean to be a servant leader? It's a great question. This is the question that we want every one of our students to answer. It's first of all realizing that your life, first, whatever your job is, your life is a stewardship unto God. God has created you in His image. He has given you abilities and talents, and as best you can, the best thing that you can do is not try to compare your abilities and talents with others, but thank God for what He's given you. Try to do work and whatever it's necessary to get better at the things you're not as good at, and that sort of thing. But surround yourself with people who can compensate for your weaknesses. And I think part of being a servant leader is first and foremost to realize it is quite okay that you don't have it all together. It is quite okay that you don't know how to do everything that's happening in your organization, because other people already know you don't know how to do it. So there's no need in you trying to pretend like that you have it all together, that you're the smartest person in the room, that all kinds of things. So the first part of being a servant leader, I think, really is this idea of what does humility mean. I love the old saying that humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. And so to be a servant leader is you look around, whatever your job is, you look around and you say, how can I use my position and my role in the organization, whatever it is, how can I use my abilities, my skills, my experiences, my position in this organization to make things easier for somebody else so that the mission can be accomplished? The very first leadership model I ever learned, I was probably 17, maybe just turning 18 at the Air Force Academy. And the first leadership model I ever learned really is two axes. On the x-axis or the y-axis is people, and on the x-axis is mission. And so this idea that your job as a leader however large your organization is, if you lead one person, if you lead yourself, your job as a leader is to balance people and mission. And so as we like to say at Charleston Southern, if you take care of the people, they'll take care of the mission. And I think without using those words, it's one of the things that his way at work does so well. In everything that you do, in the culture, in compensation, all of those things relate to that fact. If you take care of the people will take care of the mission. And you have to balance both. There are some leaders who are so people focused. They want to be nice. They want to, they don't want to hold people accountable. That's good for a couple weeks maybe. But the mission also has to be done because back to the point of your life being a stewardship unto God, your leadership is a stewardship unto God. And all of us have board members or stakeholders or stockholders or whatever else that you're taking care of. If you don't take care of the mission and the mission goes out of the company goes out of business because you haven't taken care of the mission, then guess what? You haven't taken care of the people.
That's right.
Other people are so focused on the mission that they forget about the people, and they see people as rungs on a ladder or cogs in the machine, and see people as expendable. These are people that God has made in His image. And whether they are Christians or not, He has given them to you as part of your stewardship.
Yes.
And so, again, one of the things His way at work does so very, very well is allows a business leader, a business owner to kind of keep these things in they're not in conflict, but they certainly can seem that way
There's
at
a
times.
tension. There's a tension there always.
There's always a tension, and being able to manage and embrace that tension is perhaps the most important job of a leader.
That's excellent. Yeah, it's such a good thing, and it's such a good point. And as you've said multiple times, it doesn't matter what your job is. It doesn't matter how many you're leading. If we can approach those that are within our sphere of influence that God's put around us to accomplish a common mission, and that mission in some ways has dual tracks. One is a temporal and a now track, right? We've got to run a business in a way that is profitable, healthy, and growing and thriving so we can continue to care for people, but also an eternal mission in that process that is pointing people through the way we do this, pointing people to God. And we can accomplish the temporal mission and fail completely if we ignore the eternal, because in 50 years, 100 years, that business is going to be gone. But where are the people, right? So we've got to constantly be thinking about not just balance the people and the mission here and now, but also in a 1,000-year picture, right? Which is what we're trying to focus on with His Way It Works. You brought His Way at Work up a minute ago. And as you looked at Charleston Southern, and you've got this idea that we're going to serve students, we're going to serve faculty and all that are in your sphere of influence, and you had all of this wealth of knowledge from your career to draw upon, you get to a point and you said, when you heard about His Way at Work, you saw a presentation, you said, that's what we need. Help me understand what was the gap, what was the need that you saw quickly His Way at Work would fill for you and your organization.
Yeah, when I got to Charleston Southern, coming from outside of higher education, it was funny at first because everybody sitting around the table, the senior team, they were all afraid they were going to lose their jobs. A new guy comes in, and so I said, listen, I got good news for you. I don't know a single person in higher education I could replace you with. so you're good. You're good. We're going to do this together. And over the course of some time, of course, people have to be moved around, different seats on the bus, all that. That happens in time, but it's something that happens in time. So we got to Charleston Southern, and if I were going to give advice to any sort of deputy or vice commander or vice president, you're going to become the president or the CEO, they asked me what's the best advice you can give them. I said the first thing that I would tell you is it's a whole lot harder than it looks. You think as a vice president, you got it all figured out, or when I'm in charge, I'll do this, I'll do that. I'll say, okay, we'll see. We'll see. But I have them, I would have them to read a book called You're in Charge, Now What? And so the last number of jobs I've had, I kind of use this template. And I go in, and it really is, it's a systematic way for me to ask a lot of questions about as many people, to as many people as I can come up with. And the whole point is, what's going right in the organization? What could be better? How do we get there together? So one of the things that I noticed along the way, that there were some business metrics that we had to concentrate on, and in our world, these things were enrollment, retention, and graduation rates. All right. So what are the metrics that the leader of a higher education institution needs to concentrate on? Well, those are the three, and so those are our sales metrics. How do we retain customers? All of that. But I also noticed that there were some culture issues that the foundations were great, but we could grow in, and so we, based on what I heard through the strategic planning process, and through that beginning process that I had always gone through, I noticed that there were some growth areas in the culture, and these growth areas we kind of turned into 4 core values. And because I wanted them to be memorable and meaningful, these 4 core values we refer to as EPIC core values. The E stands for extra mile service. Just like many bureaucracies, I noticed that there were silos, and the silos didn't communicate, and sometimes we were making it harder on students than we needed to. And we've done a number of things. If we had 2 more hours, we could talk about that. But sure. Extra mile service was the first one. The P is passion for student success. Why are we here? Why do we come to work, faculty and staff? We come to work so that students can be successful in this life and the next. And we make sure they understand. We are concerned, to use his way at work language, we are concerned about their eternal destiny. And we talk about that all the time. The I is innovation across the institution. It emerged because there was a sense that, well, only the president and the vice presidents have the authority to come up with new ideas. No, wow. Not true. The best ideas are going to come from those of you who are in the trenches doing the work. And the C was Christian community. Yes, we are a Christian school, and when people come to work at Charleston Southern, that they think that they're going to go, it's like working at a Sunday school or something. I said, no. This is a job. It's hard. It's difficult. We have a big mission. We have a board we answer to, and more importantly, we have students and parents that we answer to. And so, Christian community was where. And how do we make sure that yes, we're all Christians by definition. If you work at Charleston Southern, you have to be a Christian. But are we acting Christianly? Are we gossiping? How's our forgiveness quotient? What does accountability look like? I will often say you can be a lot of things at Charleston Southern, but the one thing you can't be a jerk. And so, how are our Christian values reflected in what we are doing and saying that we're doing as an organization? Mm-hmm. So these EPIC core values emerged, and through all of this, it became apparent that we needed some help. Could we have gotten some business professors and vice presidents, and could we have spent 3 years coming up with a system? Probably. Would we have gotten distracted by the real work of our lives that we would have let it fall? Most likely. And so really in God's providence, you, Chris, gave a presentation in the midst of all this. And again, I consider this part of God's providence. In the midst of all this, when I had a need, you came up, and as the old saying goes, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Well, you as the teacher appeared when the student was ready. Peter Freisler had, he has an association with Charleston Southern. I knew about his way at work from him. I knew about it in great detail from you. And so I said, I think this is what we need. And so we had conversations with you, and then you sent us the world's best culture coach, and my phrase, I don't know what you call her, but I call her our culture coach, and the systematic way in which she has led us, and I say led us because she's very, very good. I'm sure all of your culture coaches are very, very good at keeping us on task and making sure that we don't go off into the ether talking about esoteric topics. And so, for instance, how do you put and our interest was your interest, and that was, how do we put actionable behaviors to every one of our core values in a way that people know this isn't just smoke and mirrors. It's not just fancy words we're going to put on a wall. We want people to live, breathe, know, and understand these and live their lives in accordance with these core values. And so it really was God's gift to us at exactly the time that we needed it.
That's perfect. So it's, in a sense, two things that I think you brought out that I want to pause and touch on again. Number one is probably nothing that you heard me say in that presentation or nothing you heard us discuss later as we started talking about what an engagement would look like. None of that was brand new, revolutionary. You've never heard it in your life before. We didn't actually teach you something brand new. It was things you already understood, but at the same time were clear that for you to do them yourselves as an organization would be very costly and take much longer. And potentially, one of the things that Peter likes to talk about would include some sticks in the eye. As you walk through trying to make that happen, you're going to get some sticks in the eye. Whereas bringing someone in from the outside that can help, that's what they do consistently, could help streamline that process. So I think that was one point I heard you say. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so just for context here, I have a PhD in organizational leadership, all right, from the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. My dissertation topic was essential leadership competencies for U.S. Air Force wing chaplains. Right. So I've read, multiple hundreds of books, thousands of articles about leadership. So nothing that I heard was new, which was the point, really. For me, this is common sense, which isn't all that common. My problem was not in knowing that this should be done. My problem was in how do I do it? How do I maintain my day job and do all these other things and have everybody else do the same thing? Could I figure it out? Maybe. Or do we bring alongside us someone who knows what they're doing, has done this with countless other organizations, has seen success, is willing to stick with you and, again, poke you in the eye? And so Sheila and I have had a number of conversations, as she has with several on our team, and she's very, very good about knowing when to poke you in the eye and then giving you salve, to put on the wound. But without that, and she keeps us on track, she keeps us on schedule, she keeps us on time and on target. It really is. It is saving us so much time, energy, and effort. And we're probably a third of the way through. We're just now beginning to roll it out in to our leaders of people, to use your language. And it's not even hit the campus yet. But I've been talking about these core values and this culture thing for 2 or 3 years, and we're very excited about what's about to happen.
That's exciting. Well, the other thing that I heard you say is putting action to the core values, right? So one of the things we work with an organization on is taking the core values, coming up with behaviors for each of those that are action-oriented, that can also be measured, so that over time, you've got a system operating in your business, a repeatable, sustainable system where you are living out these core values through various initiatives and programs that you've built. You're measuring everything, and the reporting, the accountability you mentioned earlier, is coming back to leadership. And so, yes, it's the things you need to do. Yes, it's help in getting those things done, but it's also a system that helps it get up and running that is sustainable within the organization. And to me, those are the critical pieces that I would want to bring out. And it's exactly what you've said are the points where you felt that we would meet those needs. So let's look. I know you're not completely through the process yet with the implementation, but look out a year, 2 or 3, and in summary, what do you see as outputs of getting through the implementation and getting to a point where this is an ongoing process for Charleston Southern? What do you expect to see as output, especially as it relates back to the Christian community core value that you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, when I talk about culture, so I talked about our strategic plan has what I would call 3 lines of effort. That's military language, but the first line I talked about first of all is enrollment, retention, graduation rates. The second line being culture. So the way I describe it is culture is who we are. The other line of effort is what we do. And so just as any of us need to be self-aware of our own self-awareness and understand what our weaknesses are, our growth areas are, and working on those, the only way that we're going to know where we need to grow is if we're measuring that somehow. Right now, I have a sense of where we are. I could give you anecdote after anecdote. But we don't have a systematic way to take the pulse, the temperature of the organization routinely so that not just I have a sense on where we are, but everyone does. And so what I'm most looking forward to is this system that His Way at Work puts in place, which is not overly complicated. It's not complex. It's straightforward. It's easily understandable. And again, there's a system at which it's not going to be as if somebody might say, "Oh, okay, the president he read another book, he went to another seminar, he's coming back. This is going to last for 2 months, and we'll just wait him out." Right. We wait him out, he'll drop it, move on to the next thing. This is not what this is. We are finally embedding in our culture behaviors that define who we are, what we should be doing, and measure that, and measure it not just once, but measure it basically quarterly, as I understand it. And so we continually get this feedback, and there's a big sense that even the very act of not just the president talking about it, but vice presidents and leaders of people, and then you want it to be this this ground floor thing that comes up from the bottom to the top in terms of the organizational chart. But it will give a language, a lexicon to everybody, so that we're all talking about these things, and we know that, oh, by the way, everybody now is on the lookout. I'm looking for somebody who's behaving in an extra mile service kind of way. If there's conflict in the workplace, what I want to happen, I want conflict to be resolved in a biblical way. And so Christian community says this is how we do it here. We don't allow gossip. We don't allow, if somebody hurts you, we seek forgiveness and we move on together. And so in the course of the next 2 or 3 years, we will have a very real sense, measurable sense of where we've come from, where we're going, and where we've been. And I'm very excited about that for all those reasons.
That's exciting. And just as an additional note, you didn't come into this process unaware of where you were in the key metrics that were handed to you just as by nature of being a university president, right? Enrollment, right, retention, and graduation rates. You guys know those in and out. You know exactly where you are in those metrics. It's the cultural side that typically we have, as a leader, a sense of it, but it's only a sense of really what's getting to us. Like you said, anecdotal experiences where we can say, well, I saw this happen over here the other day and I heard about this over here, but we have really no sense, no measurable sense of where we are culturally without something like this. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Now,
In fact, I'll just, on that point, let me just say, the only measurable sense I had was that I read all the exit surveys. And so the only reason I knew that there were cultural growth areas was from exit surveys. Now I try to be approachable. I walk around, I ask questions. People will tell you things, and so I knew that as well. But how sad is it that I didn't find out until people were leaving what their problems were? And what we're doing now is making it a point of conversation from the very beginning. As we onboard people, and Sheila's going to help us with this. Yeah. As we onboard people, we want them to understand that this is who we are. In fact, in the hiring process, we want to make sure everybody understands that this is who we are. And if this isn't who you are or who you want to be, then this might not be the place for you to work. And so all of this together is what we're very excited about.
Well, I'm excited. I can't wait to see it continue to progress. I can't wait to see what the results are. I want to talk again, not that you and I have to wait a couple years before we talk again, but certainly would love to revisit this, right, as you start to see some of the results of this work. So this has been really a strong conversation, Dr. Costin. I appreciate you taking the time to spend with us and to go through some of this, to share your experience and your path. I've got one closing question. I ask this of all of our guests, and that is, what advice do you wish you had received 10 years earlier? What advice during your life did someone give you that you wish you had received 10 years earlier? Would have made a big difference?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier, but I'll go back to when I was a young lieutenant, and it was the period at which I had been called to the ministry, and I probably was not giving my employer 100% at work because I was focused on the next thing. God called me to be a chaplain. I was going to be an Air Force chaplain, and so I had this crusty old major. Who was an F4 backseater who took me aside, and we went on a run together. And he basically chewed me out. And what he said to me was, he says, Lieutenant, I know you're a Christian, but I want you to have a sense of the example that you're giving to others who aren't Christian in our unit, because what they might be seeing as somebody who is not as devoted to the job he's getting paid to do, and is more devoted to preparing for a job he's not yet doing. And this guy said to me, it was a come to Jesus meeting for real. He said, you need to get your act together. When I was promoted to become the Chief of Chaplains, he was at the event, and I publicly thanked him for being willing to do that for me. So
that's fantastic.
From that conversation, it's the advice I now give every lieutenant or every young college graduate. I give them two pieces of advice that I got from him. The first of all, I've mentioned before, is bloom where you're planted. And the second is a corollary, is don't burn any bridges. Do the work that you need to do to be the best at the job that you have. You don't have to point to yourself. Just do the job you've been given. Be a steward of your life. Be a steward of your leadership, and let God use you. But and so those are the two pieces of advice I was given very early on. That I think about that conversation several times a month for sure. Often during periods, days on end, I think about that conversation. So I appreciate him, and I've tried to do something similar to others along the way, and I've also tried to be open to hearing that same conversation directed toward me from others, because you're never as good as you think you are. And certainly you're never as good as you need to be to lead the organization and to do the things God wants the organization to do.
That's fantastic. It is so easy as a leader, especially one who has any aspiration or any determination or even vision to live in the future, to live in that next role, to start doing those things that you want to be doing or working on or focused on, instead of focusing right where he has us. And, it's no different than materially wishing I had something else that others have versus being thankful and a good steward of what he's given me. And so I appreciate you sharing that and not just sharing it, Dr. Costin, but living it out. And that's, fortunately for you, it was earlier in your career, and I understand it could have been even earlier than that. That would be certainly helpful, but I'm glad it wasn't 5 years ago somebody gave you that advice, because it certainly had an impact on your life, right? Well, listen, this has been fantastic. Thank you again for taking the time. I encourage anyone listening to check out the book that you mentioned earlier, which is You're in Charge, Now What? Is that right?
Right. It's not a Christian book, but it's very helpful.
Very helpful. So we'll put that book in the show notes. And just thank you for the time. I thank you for your sharing and willingness to be here. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thanks so much. God bless you.
You too. Thank you for listening to another episode of Eternal ROI. If you like what you heard, we would love for you to take a moment and leave us a review and share an episode with somebody you know. If you are inspired to begin bringing the power of God's love into your workplace, take a moment and check out our free assessment at hwaw.com. It'll only take you a few moments. It'll give you a snapshot of what your company looks like and maybe some ways to move forward. Just click on the link in the show notes, and we'll see you next time.